You said something about young men struggling, which is came to mind as you're talking about you being that young man who seemed to be quite confused with a variety of emotions and um, less experience about what the correct outlets were for those emotions. You said recently, in fact, one of the big things I've been worried about recently is young men and how angry they've become, how alone they've become, how isolated they've become, and then ironically, how they've turned the anger isolation into a community. There's a couple of words there that seem to fit the shoe that would go on your foot: anger, isolation, as a young man, loneliness. Can you relate to what young men are going through in the sort of modern world today? Because the stats on young men are quite shocking.
Yeah.
The mental health stats, the suicidality stats, the depression stats, the stats around purposelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted to know how you're looking at young men today. I get asked all the time by people that listen to the show. They say they've got a young son and the son is struggling. They don't know who they are, where they belong, what their purpose is. How to make friends is a big one. What are you seeing when you look out into the world, the state of young men?
So I think I can empathize with a lot of it, and I think I can relate to some of it. But on my side, other than the anger, let's say, I wasn't isolated. I didn't feel isolated at all. Because I got to play with other kids, and because I was with other kids, and because I had my cousins and everybody, I never felt isolated, So even when I was talking to you about my grandmother, I think you used isolated, but I didn't, because I genuinely never perceived it as that, because I was in the home with people. It's just they were grannies. So do you get what I'm saying? So I didn't feel like isolated in that way. Definitely felt like an outsider, though, which is a different feeling that's adjacent. I think it occupies the same lexical field, but it isn't the exact same thing, because isolation, I think, can come with it like a certain solitude and a certain, a feeling of like knowing that you are in this thing alone because you are in this thing alone. But then being an outsider is a different, it's a different type of torture. And I think that's maybe what a lot of men are experiencing that I can relate to. I think for a long time, we've lived in a world where we've told people what they're supposed to do, how they're supposed to do it, and it was sort of easily realized, right? And now I'm not a historian. I don't know every, history that we've gone through, but from the little that I've read and from the historians that I have spoken to, society goes in these waves and we move through these waves. And I think we shouldn't take for granted now that there was a whole generation of young men who were given a purpose by war, a lot of war. And war is one of the most powerful thrusts of purpose that a nation will ever experience. Young men are told what they're supposed to be doing. Your country needs you. You need to go and fight, young man. You need to protect this country. And you're like, I need to protect this country. Now, even if you don't want to dodge the draft, you've been given a purpose in a strange way. Even if you're like, I'm anti-war, now you have a purpose. Your purpose is to be against the war. Your purpose is to oppose the war. Your purpose is to spread love and peace. The other person's purpose is to survive the war. Another person's purpose is to win at the war. But you have a purpose. And that purpose is powerful and it propels nations forward, And then you enter into a period of what we would argue is relative peace. And I say relative because there are many parts of the world where there are just like these constant chronic wars that are waging. But for most people, what are you doing? You're sitting in a world where there is no draft and there is no imminent war. And it's a choice now. Do you want to go to the military or do you not? And you don't have to. And then also, things aren't just given to you. Before, when your parents were like, go get a job, it meant there was a job to get. If your parents were like, go get a job, you could. It was almost harder to not get a job back in the day than it is now, in a strange way, because like it was just like this thing you do. It was doing. I sweep, I clean, I collect, I fix. It was so simple. And I think now we're living in a world where many young men are experiencing a purposelessness because it's sort of like not laid out in any way, shape, or form. And I think we've created such a narrow scope of what people can do or can't do, or like we've rewarded so few things that I think we've exacerbated the problem. Gone are the times when being a painter, a philosopher, some sort of artisan is like celebrated in that way. Gone are the days where skills are passed down from generation to generation, and it seems like that's less and less becoming a thing. And from what I've been told, a lot of it can be tracked back to like industrialization and this consolidation of manufacturing. So
an interesting point of this, as you were talking, is because more women now are graduating with college degrees, and because of the equality movement, that's meant that men and women now are both in the workforce at high-level positions. I mean, even in that, there's going to be less jobs available for those men who would clearly before in the past have much
they would
more
just have the job.
Yeah. And also, there's this really interesting thing that a lady was talking to me about on my podcast, where she said that there's still a stigma in society that a man is to be the provider.
Yes.
But in a world where they're less able to get those top jobs to provide, and women are earning more, which no one's got an issue with at all.
Not no one.
Yeah. Some people have an issue with that. That's true.
Yes.
I don't have an issue. I don't think you do. But they were referring to it as you could say the short man problem or the tall girl problem, where effectively they were saying that women want to date up and to the right, which has been shown in the surveys, but there's less people up to the right now. And there was another survey that said 70 or 80% of women want their husband to be a provider. But the math doesn't math here, because there isn't that many men up there anymore. So, and when you look at the dating stats, the sex stats, the age in which men lose their virginity now, the amount of men that haven't had sex in the last year, it effectively looks like just the top 10% of men are having all the fun, and the bottom 50% have been disenfranchised by the system.
Yeah, but I think about this all the time, and I try and spend as much time reading, thinking, and discussing with people who are far more brilliant than I'll ever be. And what I've come to realize is we may now be experiencing a culmination of the dominoes. We're experiencing the dominoes of a declining middle class, and governments around the world no longer propping up the middle class, because anyone who's real about economics knows that like the middle class is an invented thing, really. And it's governments actively saying we're going to create it, right? So as that has declined over time and people have sort of created this illusion that no, everyone can just get there on their own merit and like nothing needs to be created for you, we've seen the middle class decline. What happens then is there's a gap, between the rich and the poor. Then there's another domino that falls, and it's like the consolidation of wealth. These mega corporations around the world that find ways to not pay taxes, that find ways to pay like slave wages to some people and then sell you a cheap product and then give you credit that you shouldn't get and then put you in a debt cycle that you shouldn't be in. And that's one domino, and then politics becomes more polarized and more extreme because of algorithms and the way we say it. That's another domino. That's another domino. That's another domino. That's another domino. Companies find ways, as you said, to hire fewer people to get more out of them or hire different people. That's another domino. And in a strange way, I think of this sometimes. I go, you see gifts and curses. This is purely anecdotal in my life. It's not research, but I'm willing to bet on this and I'm willing to stand by it. One of the curses that women experience because of being pushed out of the workplace and being like forced to stay at home and for such a long time was they learned how to find purpose in what most people would consider mundane and maybe even meaningless. Women have found ways to like fill their time with community and with connecting, and they found ways to like look after their bodies and work out and do things. And it's different in different communities, like knitting clubs, book clubs. And just think about that. It's like it takes up your time. It gives you a purpose. We're going to read this book and then we're going to discuss it. And fundamentally it's nothing, but it's something, and it drives you forward. It makes you feel like you're supposed to be somewhere. You're supposed to be doing something. And then when the workplace opened up, the women are like, oh, we can go and work as well. And, I don't know about you, but in school, all the girls were smarter than we were in class anyway. And so now they're comfortably working, especially in an office environment, which is sort of like designed perfectly for them in that way. And then guys, I think we haven't practiced that. I don't know many guys. I don't know about you. I don't know many guys who know how to just sit with their male friends and just be. Not do a thing, be. Like just be. And I find, and I'll be careful in saying this, but I have found that the degree of comfort in just being is different depending on where you're from in the world. So like my friends who are from third world countries, developing nations, whether it's South Africa and we're in the township, or whether it's my friends from Trinidad, or it's like in Trinidad, they even have a word for it, liming, they say, let's lime. And liming means spending time together with no purpose whatsoever. That's literally what my Trini friends say. They're like, yo, we're going to lime on Saturday. That means we're doing nothing. It doesn't mean we're going to go see a game. It doesn't mean we're going to watch a movie. We're going to lime. It means your friend is going to come. They're going to sit on the couch and you're just going to be. You'll talk and then you won't talk, and then you laugh and then you won't laugh. And I don't know about you, but I feel like we're not as good at that. Like I read something the other day that was great, and was talking about how guys always need the third thing. There's always the third thing. There's you, there's me, and there's the third thing. Hey, what are you doing on Saturday? Why don't we, you want to go fishing? It's like, why do we need the fishing? Why can't we just sit like this and be like, hey, what's happening in your heart, Stephen? What's going on? What's happening in my heart? Or let me tell you about what's going on. Women can do that. And some may argue that it's, maybe they've been genetically coded, but I also think they've been forced to practice that because men were like, you can't come to the, the factory, the office, everything for so long. And then women are like, all right. And I think that's another thing that men are struggling with, but it's not like their fault. It's the dominoes. When I was young, we used to go to the mall. We should go to the mall and we'd hang out with other kids. And then now malls aren't really a thing. And then kids don't really hang out anywhere. And everything's become about money and transactions. Think about how few places you can go to connect with people without money now. You know what I mean? But when I was growing up, it was quite common. You just went and you hung out with other kids. And that was just what you did. It didn't involve money. And I think we're starting to experience that domino affecting society now. Do you have money for a video game console? No. Oh, then you can't meet up with your friends on Fortnite. Do you have money to go to a movie? No, you don't. Oh, and movies have gone up. Yeah, you can't hang out with your friends at the movies. Can you afford an Uber ride? No, you can't. Can you? All these things now have meant that I think we're experiencing a generation of men in particular who are not just isolated, but not practiced in the arts of just like connecting with another male for no other purpose than to just like share hearts and be human beings.
I've heard you talk about how you think we're a sort of continuation of our ancestors and their sort of legacy. Is that kind of you? I've heard you talk about this before, and as you were saying about this idea that women are able to connect without the third thing, it made me think, I think a lot of women have had that modeled by the generation that came before them. Yeah. Whereas, I don't know about you, but I didn't have that modeled in my house. Exactly. I never saw my dad sit with a guy and
But that's what I mean.
He didn't even talk to us. We didn't even have those conversations.
That's what I mean.
I call him by his first name.
Yes.
And, I mean, he wouldn't even... He's like an awkward hugger. Like a guy...
Yeah.
You might get to like... Get the fuck off me. But we don't have that modeled, so where do we learn the skill?
Yeah.
And you'd be weird if you said to your friend... Well, most people would be weird if they said, we just want to sit down and just what's in your heart.
Yeah, no.
Your friend would be like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. My friends treat me like that. I still do that now. I think they've softened to it. My friends have sort of, they indulge me. And I think they enjoy it for the most part. But like, I do that with my guy friends. Just be like, man, let's just take a moment.
Does it come naturally to
Just
you?
look into my eyes and let's just take a moment. Well, here's the thing, funny enough. I spent most of my life with women. So I spent most of my time with my mom, with my grandmother and my grandmother's friends, because I was in the house with them. I'm just sitting around with these women, just like talking and sharing. I spent very little time with like the men in that way.
So those men that are struggling, they'll probably be hearing you and thinking that you're so far away from them in terms of that ability to be emotionally expressive and just to check in. For a lot of them, it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
What is it they need? Like, where do they need to start? Is there a place to start?
I think it is difficult, but I also think we have tools to make it easy. So I'm very hesitant to very quickly just say to every man, hey, go out there and be vulnerable and whatever. Because the sad truth is a lot of guys have punished a lot of guys for being vulnerable and being themselves. And we have to acknowledge that as well. There's so many times when a guy will go to their friends and say, man, I'm sad. And people are like, you sad? Oh, what are you, pussy? Oh, look at the guy, he's sad. What do you mean she broke up with you? Come on, get out there, man. And now all of a sudden, the circle that you had that you thought was protecting you has revealed to you that if you show your vulnerability, you're ostracized from it.
It's not safe.
Yeah, so you don't want to be there. And then sometimes it will even turn into a fight. You know, now all of a sudden people are slapping you or hitting you or punching you because you've admitted that you're vulnerable. And so I think that's another place where young men struggle, is like, we have to maintain this bravado. And then we see all these influencers online who keep telling us like, yeah, you're a tough guy. That's what you got to be a tough man. You got to be a tough man. That's what you got to do. Never once are they saying to you like, yo, what do you feel? How do you get rid of those feelings, or how do you deal with them? How do you process them? Who's your friend that you can like literally sit with and cry with? Do you have one? But I do think we have tools. You know, I think, again, you know, gifts and curses. The curse of the online world is that it affords everybody anonymity, and so they can be the worst of themselves. I think the gift is also the anonymity. You know, I think a lot of people will be shocked at how you can connect to a person online in like a really honest and beautiful way, because you're safer in a way. You know, I've made some of my best friends playing like Warzone. You know, when the pandemic hits, I was like, everyone was playing Warzone. I was like, I'll jump on. I'm not really like an FPS guy. And I jumped on and I was decent at it, but I made friends playing this game and would talk to people, and you'd regularly meet with them. And some people were assholes, but a lot of them weren't. And the ones who weren't, I would re-link up with and we'd play. And then it goes from talking about the game and talking about your loadouts. And then all of a sudden you're talking about your family and your life and how are things and how's your week been and how's work been and what's going on with your boss and that promotion and that. And to this day, one of my closest friends, a person who I like consider like a brother to me, is from that video game. I never knew what he looked like. All I knew was what he sounded like. And we like know each other because we explored a world that was, for all intents and purposes, fake, and yet the most real experience that we could have. And I think, you know, I look at like Reddit, for instance. I think Reddit's one of the most beautiful communities I've ever seen, where a guy can get on Reddit, you can write a post and you can say anything. You can say, I'm struggling with this. I'm having suicidal thoughts. I feel like I don't have a purpose. And you'll be shocked at how many other guys will jump on and go, hey man, I'm in the same boat. Hey, I'm also struggling. I'm also sad. I also, my parents, I don't have a good relationship with them. You'll be shocked at how that community comes around you, because there is the safety of knowing that you're not exposing like your name and your face, but you are exposing the thing that's inside you. And so,
is it a shame that we can't do that in person as well?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's the biggest thing that's limiting men, you know? I think it truly is. It's one of the biggest thing that's limiting men in society, is that we don't have an outlet for our emotions. We don't, you know, so if we're not fighting or competing, then we're just bottling.
It comes with a cost, doesn't it, if you bottle things?
Yeah. Yeah, it does.
It never really stays inside the bottle. It's like the bottle's got a hole in it or something.
Yeah, exactly.